Welcome to Module 7. This module will study emotion in relation to gender and language and highlighting the cognitive, communicative, and social aspects of the emotional process. It will focus on gender differences in emotional experience and expression and their reflection in literary discourse with a special emphasis on poetry. It will be preeminently theoretical and will draw from the fields of social sciences and literary and studies and linguistics in relation to gender and emotional expression. It will focus on discursive practice more than in textual analysis to study gender and emotion in the literary and poetic discourse. Part 1 introduces theoretical perspectives that support how cognition and the social context are central to the generation of emotion and its relation to gender. 1. Evolution in the theories of emotion. Early organismic or bodily-oriented theories of emotion, developed by Darwin, James, and Lange, stress bodily aspects of emotion as previous and independent from reflection. Although they take into account the expressive and communicative nature of emotions, they underplay cognitive aspects, agency, and self-reflection. Magda Arnold's cognitive appraisal theories of emotion joined emotion to motivation, interpretation, and evaluation. That is, a conflictual event happens, the physiological and psychological shock together with interpretation produce the emotion and determine the appropriate action. The interpretation is a cognitive act. She considered that there was an initial intuitive appraisal through affective memory and a deliberate appraisal through reflection and language. Emotions from this perspective originate in a personal reaction within a complex cognitive and individual experience. More recent social constructivist theories of emotions, mainly developed by Averill, consider that how a person appraises his/her environment is culturally determined and contextualized within a social and moral order that prescribes a set of responses and a proper way to assess certain situations through beliefs, desires, and judgments. The emotional process has an interactive, intersubjective, and contextual nature. The rules of emotion, emotional behavior, and expression are learned and cultural determined. These theories establish emotions as dynamic social processes. Here you have a diagram showing the development of emotion from the perspective of the different theories. The first one emphasizing how environmental stimuli results in body response and feeling, and then action and motion. The second one, the cognitive, implementing appraisal as intuitive and primary first, and then cognitive, a complex cognitive appraisal and reappraisal that influences reassessment of response, feeling, and action. Therefore, it's able to modify emotion. And the last one, the social constructivists, suggest that these appraisals relate to the cultural and social realm. That is, evaluations and appraisal occur following social norms of interaction and behavior between the self, others, and the environment. The constitution and expression of emotions are culturally and socially constructed. 2. The social context in gender and emotion, the social constructivist approach. A social constructivist approach to emotion highlights the fact that appraisals and reappraisals involve engagement with social meaning. The social context does not only affect appraisal, but other phases in the emotional process. For example, how we face the event that triggers emotion, how we evaluate the event, how we respond to the event, and the way we communicate our emotional reaction. In all these levels of the emotional process, social norms of behavior and expression apply, following varieties from cultural backgrounds such as location, class, ethnicity, gender, and age. Social regulations on gender and emotion are deployed in body responses, cognitive processing, and expressive strategies. That is, being a man or a woman, you should behave, act, and express emotions in certain normative ways. Feminist sociological and psychological research embraces this theory basically because they believe gender emotion stereotypes strongly influence individuals. The focus on the social context undermines the belief that gender is natural or essential related to the body, and suggests that it is socially constructed in the same way that emotional experience and expression is not biologically set in relation to gender, but learned, acquired, and enacted in a social context. Social constructivist approaches relate to the progression of contemporary gender studies that reach the understanding of gender not as naturally linked to the body, but performed following Judith Butler's theories. That is, gender is something we do in social, cultural, and linguistic practices. Therefore, these practices can be also used to regulate and change gender stereotypes and to re-educate normative expectations and behaviors by how we practice being a man or a woman and by how we practice gender emotions. 3. Cognition, emotion, and gender, the functions of communication, meaning, and reflection. The cognitive research on emotion, focusing on aspects such as interpretation, evaluation, perception, motivation, memory, reflection, and language, through expression and communication, challenges established cultural scientific polarizations between rationality and feeling, that is, believing that or understanding that emotions are unruly bodily phenomena, and reason as related solely to the mind. This links to feminist theories of science and philosophy, which undermine binaries between the body and mind and emotion and reason, which have maintained stereotypes on gender. Also, feminist psychological studies suggest and consider that traditional scientific literature and organismic theories reflect a dominant male scientific view on emotion. The relation between emotion and cognition have been proved in numerous studies. That emotion affects cognition has been explained in the communicative theory of emotion and in the associative network model of emotion that suggests that information units or nodes in the brain are highly affected by emotional processes, affect, and mood, therefore dominating the information process in cognition. That cognition affects emotion is found in the evidence that cognitive reappraisal of emotional situation through verbalizing, reevaluation, and thinking on the emotional process can even change physiological responses to stimuli, memory, and future emotional experience. The emotional process is interactional and communicative. It is cognition which enables us to decode the meaning and to evaluate the initial event through memory, to position ourselves in relation to that event through reflection, to communicate to others our evaluation and position through affective expression, through language. Emotions are active attempts to resolve contradictions, conflicts, through the search for meaning and intelligibility. In this search for meaning, we choose positions and express and communicate to others those positions, provoking action that change ourselves in relation to the environment. Emotions then are dynamic cognitive processes of interrelation. Affective expression and communication through meaning and language completes the emotional process in two ways, from sense to symbol. The sensorial responses to the environment transfer through cognition into a symbolic level of self-reflection. Senses and body perceive, but cognition and language through meaning make emotion available to ourselves and to others in interaction. Impact emotion. Emotions involve others. The communication of emotion is directed at modification or impact on environment and others, provoking change in the relation between the self and the world. Emotions are the psychological energy to move and to act through distance, closeness towards goals. Language and communication of emotion puts the symbolic somehow back into material reality by affecting it through motion action. The emphasis on cognition in emotion relates to gender in different ways. Scientific evidence has shown that men's emotional processes are highly bodily oriented through self-perception of organismic response. Women's emotional processes rely mainly on cognitive and situational information. This is interesting because it challenges a stereotypical belief on the emotional woman somehow. The concept of agency. Language, self-reflection, and memory make the emotional subject agentic with the strategies for regulating emotion. This is important for feminist research methodologies because women become agents of their experiences of emotion, and it also provides agentic qualities to gender construction in emotion scientific discourses. Conclusions for part 1. From body-oriented theories to social constructivist theories of emotions, we have seen that the evolution in research towards a social and cognitive understanding of the emotional process. Emotions are intersubjective social phenomena, since evaluation and appraisal are guided by culturally accepted values that result in appropriate behavior, expression, or action in the environment. Social constructivist theories and feminist research on emotion suggest that gender emotion stereotypes are culturally learned and not biologically set, but socially and linguistically performed. Emotions are not affective states or bodily reactions, but complex, dynamic, social cognitive processes that include interpretation, evaluation, perception, motivation, memory, reflection, and language. In the last decades, there has been extensive research on how cognition plays a crucial part in the generation of emotion and how emotion affects cognition and the way information is processed. Cognition and gender. Has been researched that women's emotional processes rely on cognitive regulation and expression, while men's on awareness of inner bodily responses. Also, cognition and reflection provides agency to the emotional subject. Intersubjectivity, communication, meaning. The construction of emotion occur in the context of others and as communicative acts to others through expression, language, and meaning. Finally, the social aspects and the cognitive aspects reveal the engagement between the self, others, and the environment in emotional processes. That is, society regulates emotion and gender in the individual, but individual cognitive processes through reflection, reappraisal, and communicative and expressive strategies can modify social regulations on gender and emotions.